Mitchell was relieved when Curtly's boyfriend Jim moved into the cage. He didn't believe in ghosts or the paranormal, Mitchell wrote, but after several months in the cage, he flatly refused to be left alone inside the house. The three roommates made a pact. Under no circumstances would we leave any of us alone inside the old prison, for any reason at all. We began to plan our lives and daily schedules around that single unbreakable rule, but in October of 2006, Curtly told Mitchell that she and Jim were moving out. They were expecting a baby. I couldn't blame them. Mitchell recalled the cage was no place for children. By then she was slowly accepting it might not be the place for any living being. To avoid being alone, Mitchell filled the cage with visitors. One afternoon she invited Kirsty Williams, her husband Neil, for drinks. Neil, who was serving in the British Army, was the first to see the blood. 20 or 30 droplets of deep red blood splattered on the floor, as if dropped from a pipette or bleeding nose. Williams told me, "I'm a nurse, I work in the cancer and hematology. I definitely knew that this was blood, but I couldn't explain it. It wasn't there when we arrived." Everyone panicked as Mitchell searched for a credible explanation. The first thing we were thinking is shit. Somebody has opened the door window and a cat come in that is injured. Maybe this was one of the crows that often flew inside the cage and smashed against its windows, trying to escape. But they found nothing. Mitchell took it as a warning. Mitchell's friends started to feel uneasy about visiting the cage. There was another incident, Williams told me. Vanessa felt what she described as something or somebody biting her ear. "I just absolutely screamed," Mitchell recalled. After 2 years in the cage, Mitchell had given up searching for rational explanations for the strange activity. Cell phone towers, electromagnetic fields, and practical jokers were no longer feasible. She had come to terms with living alongside the spirits of one or more witch. When in the summer of 2007, Mitchell felt unwell, I kept on going back to the doctor, and he kept giving me loads and loads of tablets. He thought I had a pelvic inflammation disorder. She told me at the hospital a nurse smeared cold gel onto her stomach and applied an ultrasound wand. The nurse saw the issue. "You've got 5.5-month-old baby in there," Mitchell screamed. She refused to look at the screen. Being a single parent was not in her plans, but raising a child in the cage was impossible. "I knew that baby's never going to be safe in that house," she recalled. A blind panic rose inside Mitchell. "I can't even cope with this house alone," she thought. "How the hell can I do this?" Back in 1582, single mother of Ulster camp sat in the cage alone as a steward. She had been separated from her 80-year-old son, Thomas Rabbit, and faced accusation that could send her to the gallows. Then Lord Darcy offered lunacy. If she confessed to the charges, she had no choice, said historian Marian Gibson. Imagine if you are a poor village woman, and the big man in the authority comes down from the big house and says, "Now, tell me about how you're a witch." Darcy transported camp 16 miles by wooden cart to stand trial in nearby Chelmsford. Meanwhile, he started to turn the village and her family against her. During a chaotic trial, Kemp's brother Lawrence accused her of bewitching his wife, who immediately gasped and died. Thomas and her son told the court about his mother's familiars: 4 imps, 2 cats, 1 sheep, and a toad that sucked her blood. A neighbour, Anis Lefebvre, accused Kemp of sickening her child. The evidence was clear. Lefebvre announced when she carried her baby past Kemp's house, he screamed eagerly. The court's mercy. A sobbing Kemp dropped to her knees and confessed. She also accused 12 other St. Oysth women of witchcraft. All were dragged to court, but 2 were not indicted. 2 were discharged, 4 were acquitted, and 4 were found guilty. Kemp was betrayed. She was sentenced to death alongside another accused witch named Elizabeth Bennet. They were likely pardoned through the town. They were likely paraded through the town and hanged before the cheering crowds. England learned little from the St. Oysth witch trials. Parliament later passed the Witchcraft Statute of 1604, officially ruling witchcraft as a crime in itself, punishable by death. Vigilantes searched the country for witches and murdered them for cash. In 1645, a failing solicitor named Matthew Hopkins appointed himself England's Witchfinder General, based in Manningtree, a 5-minute gallop from St. Oysth. Hopkins killed an estimated 230 women, most like Kemp. He buried in the unsacred land, with the bodies pointing north-south. The Essex witch trials echoed through time, said Gibson. Salem isn't in Essex County for no reason. These American communities were seeded communities back at home in Essex, and they took their beliefs with them. They replicated the whole thing into the New World. In 1921, a St. Oysth's man was digging in his backyard on Mill Street when he discovered 2 skeletons. Charles Brooker declared them witches and charged tourists 6 pence to peer into their graves. This enterprise lasted until 1932, when an unexplained fire engulfed Brooker's home, and the fireman fell into his witch pit. Fearing a curse, locals reburied the bones, but they were eventually sold to England's Museum of Witchcraft, and later to an eccentric artist named Robert Lekiewicz. After Robert died in 2002, a British documentarian named John Warland petitioned his estate to re-bury the bones in St. Oysth, where they belonged. In Warland's film, The Witches Who Wouldn't Stay Buried, solicitor Peter Wormley and solemn executioner of the Lekiewicz estate admitted that strange phenomenon followed the bones. Things have tipped over, he said. Windows have closed themselves, which would have been rusted open. By September of 2007, different troubles were bubbling in the UK. There were signs of a global recession brewing, and British banks had started going bust. St. Oysth residents panicked. People lost their houses here My mortgage doubled literally overnight. Mitchell recalled, due to her variable mortgage rate, her payments increased to £900. That's approximately $1,175. I just got bit by bit into debt, she said. Without Nicole's rent, Mitchell worried about supporting a baby. As a recession loomed, fewer customers brought caravans. Sometimes Mitchell slept in the caravans at work to save gas money driving home. A deep depression gripped her. I remember just being like a robot at work, she recalled. Her commission evaporated. At home, the attacks seemed to increase as her stomach grew. Mitchell recalled the spirit becoming more violent too. I was looking in the mirror, and all of a sudden I felt two hands shove me, and I hit the floor. And I fell onto the spare room. If I were to fall the other way, I'd have gone straight downstairs, she said. Mitchell lay on the floor, scared of going into labour. If I move an inch, she thought, I'm going to be in trouble. As her due date neared, Mitchell asked a plumber to install a new bathroom. He ran terrified from the house after hearing heavy footsteps. She said a friend tasked with repairing an electrical fault in the cage told Mitchell that a force tried to push him down the stairs. Only Freddie Young, now a chatty teenager, wanted to spend time at the cage. Much to Nan's dismay, she cast some kind of protection thing on him, Young said. But when he arrived at the cage, sometimes things happened that chilled his bones. As I walked in, clear as day, in my ear hole a man says to me, "That shit won't work here." Young spun around, there was no one there. The man soon presented himself, Mitchell says. I'm watching TV, and I've seen this man, but I could only see him from the waist up, and he was gliding very, very slowly, looking at me. Gliding past the beams, I saw him so clearly. He even had, like laughter lines. He had black spiky hair, and he had old-fashioned clothes on, but I couldn't see him from the legs down. Mitchell sensed he could have been a jailer. On Christmas Eve of 2007, Mitchell gave birth to her first child, Jesse. She took him home to the cage, carefully avoiding the prison room. Mitchell went straight back to selling caravans. Work was impossible, she said. Because I wasn't sleeping at night, a new sales manager had joined the company, and for the first time in her career, Mitchell felt bullied. He stopped me from being able to go out and to the showground to pick up business, so I basically stopped making money. She recalled every night she drove home to her hell house, where she had to reluctantly become the latest in a long line of terrified owners. Living inside the cage was grueling. She wrote about that time. The longest slog of my life. It drove me to the brink of exhaustion and nervous breakdown. Baby Jessie only slept in Mitchell's bedroom, in the modern part of the building. She was angry that her life had been reduced to such a small room. One night I awoke to the sound of footsteps pounding up the stairs with a boom, boom, boom. The metal latches crashed against the door, as if someone was about to burst in. It was so violent and so quick, she recalled, and my heart was bursting out of my chest. And then nothing. Mitchell became a nervous wreck as the attacks continued night and day. I was brushing my teeth and I was hit on the bum. Early morning getting ready to work, I was hit so hard and aggressively. In desperation, Mitchell confided in a friend and colleague. A manager of the caravan park had a daughter who would come and help. Wendy was a local police detective with an interest in supernatural. She now runs a Facebook page called Horrible Haunted History. Wendy told me she does not use her psychic powers for police work and asked to be referred to by her first name only. She still works for the police. I didn't realise how bad it was. Wendy says, recalling the day Mitchell begged her for help. The police won't do anything, Vanessa, Wendy told her. You're talking about something people don't understand. Wendy agreed to visit the cage. She didn't last long. Almost immediately after I walked over to the threshold, a banging headache. It felt like somebody was trying to crush my skull. And that old cliche, I felt like I was being watched. I had a really bad feeling like something terrible was about to happen, she said. Late one night, 3 loud knocks pounded on the front door. Young burst in. He had a blazing argument with his grandmother. Granddad was dying, he recalled. Nan was carrying on screaming, crying, and it was all a bad day. So he ran down to the cage. He knew it was midnight because the streetlights had flicked off. Mitchell says he could stay, but there was only the sofa downstairs in the prison room. I've managed to fall asleep, Young told me. It was very, very dark and kept brushing my face like there's something on it, like a spider. And I opened my eyes in the end and looked down next to me, and I shit you not, there was a woman, and she was on her knees, and she was stroking my head and brushing my hair. Terror froze me. I can't scream, he said. I can't breathe, I can't do anything. Eventually the woman vanished. Young kept his eyes open until sunrise, then fled. Mitchell now slept, while holding Jessie close in bed, which she knew was dangerous. That was just the situation I was in, she explained. The one time she put him down for a second, mysterious forces threw him off the bed and into some drink she kept on the floor. Lord have mercy. The glasses didn't break, she told me. Mitchell wanted out before the haunting claimed her sanity. When I finally came to realise this, it was on a fight I was going to win. I began to think seriously about an escape plan, she wrote. In February 2008, a winter chill swept across Essex. At the nightfall, Mitchell found herself in the street, unable to summon the courage to go inside. She tucked baby Jessie into her coat and protected him from the cold. She thought to herself, what are you going to do? You have to go in. His stuff's in there. You've got to work in the morning. And the snow started falling on his little head. She recalled, if you don't go in, you're going to freeze anyway. Then she took a deep breath and pushed open the ancient door. Tired and weary, Mitchell broke her own rules. With Jessie asleep, she crept downstairs and pressed some clothes for the morning. Alone in the prison room, she pushed an electric iron across her blouse. Just then, a jaunty electronic song filled her room. She looked down to her feet and saw several toys had come to life. Jessie's Thomas the Tank engines, 4 or 5 of them, all at once started chugging around my feet, she said. Jess, she screamed, climbing the stairs 2 at a time. There was a bloke standing at the top of the stairs, she recalled. Not a burglar, not a ghostly figure, standing between her and Jessie. Mitchell had no choice but to dash past the apparition and grab her son. As she cradled her baby, she broke down in tears. I'd rather be homeless, she decided. I'm not going to live there because it is unlivable. Mitchell put the cage on the market, naively hoping for a quick sale. Not a soul was interested. Who would be? After a few agonising months, she moved in with a friend nearby. I felt pissed off that I had to leave because it was my house, and I knew it was going to put me in more financial trouble, she said. At the end of that long, harrowing summer of 2008, Mitchell removed the last of her furniture from the cage, by daylight and with the help of friends. When the driver pulled the van up outside, he saw in the bedroom window a shadowy figured woman. Mitchell called moving out pure relief. It was also the start of more problems. She tried to rent the cage to another old friend from the village, who called on a psychic to clear the house. As soon as the woman saw the cage, she refused to enter. That tenant moved out after 4 months. Then a young couple with a baby lasted half the time. When Mitchell sought help from the church, she learned that the vicar had moved to another parish 200 miles away. Rev Flowerdew told a local newspaper that he had suffered a nervous breakdown after a block of concrete crashed through his car windscreen. With no tenants, Mitchell faced bankruptcy and needed answers. In 2010, she wrote to the Society for Physical Research, a scientific organisation established in 1882 to examine the claims of psychic and paranormal activity. John Fraser of Essex Spontaneous Cases Committee visited the cage and conducted interviews with Mitchell and her friends and former residents. I think the cage is a good case because similar things have happened to a lot of people. Fraser told me, comparing it to history's famous poltergeist cases. The one problem with the Amityville case is you have only the family as evidence, which is a very, very narrow evidence base. The fact that Mitchell's witnessed some reputable professionals. Williams is a cancer nurse, and Jung is now a school teacher, made the case more reputable. To Fraser, in his book Poltergeist, Fraser spoke of other paranormal investigations, who Vanessa allowed to inspect the cage. One investigator had left the house with angry red marks on her legs. The blisters was later examined by a doctor and diagnosed as being burn marks, wrote Fraser. Kim Sundergaard of the Danish parapsychological group told Fraser he was probed and bruised on his legs. I was standing in the courtyard. Then I broke down. I started to cry uncontrollably, he told Fraser in a recorded testimony. Word of a serious paranormal investigator soon reached England's amateur ghost hunters, who descended on St. Oysth, carrying spirit boxes, Ouija boards and other night vision cameras. Seizing the opportunity, Mitchell advertised the cage as a haunted holiday home and leased it to companies who charge visitors £35, $45 to attend ghost hunts. The British tabloids dispatched reporters from The Sun, Daily Mail and Daily Express who called the cage the most haunted house in Britain. A retired police officer claimed to have snapped a photograph of 4 ghosts carrying a dead witch in a coffin down Coffin Alley. Others captured witch-like faces and even a satanic goat. It was on an upside-down parka coat, Fraser told me. During this media circus, some of Those suggested that Mitchell had embellished her paranormal experiences. She had made quite a lot of money, said Warland, the documentarian of the cage's supernatural activity. He added, "I think it's a load of bollocks. Mitchell doesn't care. The women of St. Osyth's are no strangers to accusation. They say falsehood flies and truth comes limping after it." In 2012, Warland asked archaeologists Jacqueline McKinley to inspect St. Osyth's skeleton. She concluded that the person was not Ulster Camp but a male, and the iron spikes were recent. In addition, designed to encage the witch story. In the Clacton and Frinton's Gazette, Charles Brooker's grandson Paul made a confession. Grandad put the